Beginning route navigation. Take the left turn ahead. Turn left. Continue straight.
I want you to join me by visiting houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Hey, how does this sound? A weekly hour on News 88.7 when you'll hear a deep dive exploration into some of the top music figures in history. Maybe a career retrospective. Maybe an interview with them. Sometimes a memorial for greats who've passed, or occasionally a fun-themed music mix. I'm Paul Ingles. I've been producing shows like this for 25 years. You'll hear them on my Music Archive Showcase, Saturdays at 7 p.m., right here on News 88.7.
Welcome back to Our Body Politic. I'm Farai Chidea. If you're just joining us, we're exploring mindfulness and race with CEO of Mindful and Zen priest Rev Angel Kyoto Williams and psychologist and yoga therapist educator Dr. Gail Parker. I want to turn to your book, so I'm going to start with you, Dr. Parker. Your first book was called Restorative Yoga for Ethnic and Race-Based Stress and Trauma, and your second book was Transforming Ethnic and Race-Based Traumatic Stress with Yoga. So who was that first book written for, and how does writing transmit what you do?
I wrote it for everyone. As I said before, I'm not under the illusion that black folks and non-black people of color are the only ones who are traumatized. White fragility, for example, is a symptom of racial trauma. When you can't even have the conversation, when you just are so blocked and defensive that you're not able to be open enough to hear someone else's perspective. Yeah. These issues around race and ethnicity are impacting all of us. The American Psychological Association did a Stress in America survey in 2022, and the racial climate in this country was identified as one of the most stressful experiences for everybody. 75% Black, 70% Latinx, 69% Asian, and 56% of white people said that this is stressful for them. When you're in that, your nervous system is revved up, you don't feel safe being relaxed. You don't feel safe being still. When you can have an experience of safety and stillness, that is transformative. And so I wrote the book to support people in learning how to come into themselves, into their inner world, in a non-judgmental way, so that you're not shaming, blaming, and criticizing yourself for whatever it is you're thinking, feeling, or doing. The second book came because I think that book was published a month after George Floyd's murder. So I wrote the second book as more of as a guide to help people understand, because people always want to know, well, how do I do that? So I wrote more of a how do I do that book, which is transforming ethnic and race-based stress and trauma. I also don't want us to believe, especially black folks, that we are stuck in trauma. We can grow beyond that into what I call post-traumatic growth. You know, everybody's talking about post-traumatic stress. But these are transformative practices. And you do not have to remain stuck in a traumatic state of mind or state of being. We all have strengths. That's why we're here. And it's important for us to be able to share that narrative as well.
Rev Angel, you wrote Being Black, Zen and the Art of Living with Fearlessness and Grace. And then you also co-authored Radical Dharma, Talking Race, Love, and Liberation. What do you see as the connections that you were pointing out in those works between racial trauma, mindfulness, and healing?
You know, my first book was really an introduction because I wanted black folks in particular to be able to have access to the technology and the relief that I was experiencing through Zen, meditation in particular, but also a kind of like framing. And so that book is really a primer, and it was written about 25 years ago, so I was a little bit younger then. And then the second book is really the culmination and kind of a continuation. I co-authored it with Dr. Yasmin Saidullah and Lama Rod Owens. Lama Rod is a Buddhist in the Tibetan tradition, black and queer from the South, and really it came out of our understanding and our own experience directly, all of us also queer, that we experienced a kind of deep access to liberation, but we also realized that we needed to be having a conversation about how race, or having been racialized, is traumatizing and impacting all of us. I'm really impressed by that study, you know, that even 56% of white folks will say that is impacting them. Outside of climate change, I believe that racialization is the major single factor of divisions in this society, in the West in general, in the United States in particular. The project of racializing us has divided us, has kept us from being in relationship with each other, and it has created long-lasting, sustained, generational trauma for all of us. Race really leaves us running in fight or flight. We're just in our sympathetic nervous systems, tripping out. So Radical Dharma was our way, I want to say it was like our love song. On the one hand, to the people that were Buddhists, spiritualists, and yoga people, and saying, like, y'all, we have to navigate race. You cannot leave that outside of these practices. You can't, pretend that race is not impacting your communities, like lily white yoga communities that are trying to pretend it's like love and light, but let's not deal with race. And I've seen Buddhist teachers that literally come out of their skin when you have a conversation about race. And I'm like, if black folks raising up and saying, like, hey, we want to have people that look like us up there, if that's taking you out of seat, where's your practice? And simultaneously, what we want to say to people that are out there on the front lines, that are connected to trying to radical Dharma is that invitation to have that kind of conversation.
And I want to wrap up with both of you. When you envision the impacts that your work and work like yours can have, what do you hope for the future? You know, we're constantly evolving our show, but really what we think of the show as is a chance to help envision and build a world we want to live in. So what kind of world do you want to live in, and how does your practice and your teaching help with that? Dr. Parker first, and then I'll go to you, Rev Angel.
Golly, believe it or not, I'm living in the world I want. I'm so happy. It took a long time,
I
everybody.
love that.
But it's taken a minute. Do I encounter turmoil and negativity and unloving experience? Yeah, I mean that exists.
Speed
But
limit
it's not the world
exceeded.
I intentionally practice showing up as safe, and I want to live in a world that feels safe to me, and I want to offer a world that feels safe to other people.
Very beautiful.
It's very nice.
I love it.
And I'm not delusional, and I'm not being unrealistic,
Absolutely.
and I'm not being, I guess I'm idealistic, but I think we have to have big ideas. We're hearing a lot about resistance. Resistance is important, but we also have to be willing to reimagine the world that we want to live in and occupy. So that's the work I'm doing. And then I try to share that with other people.
Fantastic. And Rev Angel, what about you? The world you want to live in, or the world you're living in?
I'm right there with you, Dr. Parker. I'm totally living in the world that I want to live in. And that's because first and foremost, I inhabit the world of my own inner life that is steady, that is stable, that is connected. I also think that we are in an evolutionary leap forward, and we're feeling the tension, that kind of tear from an old paradigm and way of being. We are actually coming into a place, and I've said this a few times and I stand in it, Homo sapiens is about I know, right? That's actually what it means. It's like the man that knows. But what we're moving into is people that are connected by the earth, like a species evolution of Homus plectus, right? By the earth, we are connected. And what I see is that in the places in which people have more contact with each other, and they can be in a situation in which they're safe enough to allow that difference in, and we actually come to know ourselves better by way of the differences of other people. It's rough going right now because we have a lot of investment in holding on to wealth and particular types of power, but they will yield. And the more of us that are mindful, that are willing and able to situate themselves in the vision of possibility that exists inside themselves, the more we'll all be living in the world that is right here and right now for us.
Well, I have loved this conversation, and I want to thank each of you. Thank you, Reverend Angel.
Thank you so much, Farai. Thank you, Dr. Parker.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Parker.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yes.
I have enjoyed this as well.
That was author, psychologist, and yoga therapist educator Dr. Gail Parker, and the CEO of Mindful, which is spelled MNDFL, and founder of the organization Transformative Change, Rev Angel Kyoto Williams. Want to hear more? You can catch the extended version of this conversation on our podcast. Just find Our Body Politic wherever you listen to podcasts. Even when we know how beneficial mindfulness is, it can still be hard to keep a consistent personal practice. It can be even harder to just get started. So my next two guests are using music to invite people to take their seat, breathe, and meditate. Geminelle is a singer, songwriter, producer, and healer. She's also the creator of Mantra Loops, a project that combines affirmation, music, and healing. And we're going to talk about that later in the show. So welcome to Our Body Politic, Geminelle.
Hi, thank you.
We're also joined by Jasmine Lamb, a multi-hyphenate creative entrepreneur, founder of What We Share, and mindfulness meditation instructor. Welcome, Jasmine.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you both collaborated to produce the 4-track album Mindfulness in Challenging Times, and I want to say that I personally have enjoyed it a lot, and I've certainly had challenging times, as so many of us have these past few years. So I want to start off with an excerpt from the album. This is from the title track.
Mindfulness meditation is the practice of becoming familiar with the present moment. By placing our attention on the breath and leading with an open and non-judgmental awareness of whatever comes up. The benefit of this practice is that we become more synchronized in body and in mind, and begin to relate to our world in a less distracted and more wakeful way.
Jasmine, your words guide us on this album. How did you get started on mindfulness, your own personal practice, and also as someone who's able to lead others?
Well, I started meditating, I would say, maybe about 6-7 years ago. You know, prior to my journey in LA, I was living in New York and I was working in the tech space and 70-hour weeks and was struggling a lot with my mental health and just looking for, as I call them, like tools to help facilitate clarity. You know, I was having a lot of brain fog and just not feeling like myself. And so I actually started meditating to Deepak Chopra's 21-day mindfulness meditation. Before it is what it is now, they have a lot of variations, but I started doing guided meditation, and then I realized that I was still feeling maybe distracted even in that process. I started then working at a yoga tech company, which is then how I was introduced to my mindfulness meditation teacher, who then taught me the specific practice of mindfulness meditation and its lineage. He really guided me in getting my certification, and so now I work with him to help other teachers get certified. So far we've certified hundreds of other teachers around the world, and that's been my path.
And Geminel, how did you two connect? You know, let me start with that first.
Jasmine and I connected very randomly at an event in New York City, and I think after we met Jasmine, we ended up hanging out with her for the rest of the evening, exchanged information, and then she has really supported the growth of my husband's company, Tunnel Vision Creative Agency. She's been a pillar of press and marketing for my own career. And so when Jasmine came to me with a project in mind for mindfulness in challenging times, I knew that I wanted to support her in any way that I could.
And how did you decide what to bring to the table in terms of putting music with Jasmine's works, Geminel?
Well, it was really a collaboration between the two of us. You know, I've been a producer for a long time, creating my own soundtracks and doing like background scoring for film and television and commercials. And that's kind of where my lane as a producer has kind of fallen. And so when Jasmine mentioned that she wanted to do a meditation album, I asked her if she wanted music for it. And then she and I worked together to kind of develop the sound that she really wanted to create around this project and like what emotions she wanted to evoke from the audience. And we kind of went back and forth working virtually and figuring out like, okay, is this kind of the vibe that you want, or is this the vibe? And then just curating that playlist together.
Jasmine, we've been doing a series of conversations on mental health, physical health, spiritual health, and the intersection of all of these. And we always center Black and BIPOC voices in these conversations. What should we be learning now as Black or BIPOC people about how to bring this into our lives, meaning meditation and mindfulness? Some people have always had this be a part of their lives. For some people, they're like, oh, this is just something that, if you'll forgive the stereotype, skinny white women in yoga pants do. And there's all sorts of different approaches and different cultures that flow into meditation and mindfulness. How do you think about the journey that people of color are on right now as members of society, and how meditation and mindfulness fits into that?
Yeah, I think that this particular style of meditation is really powerful. I think especially for Black people, brown people, BIPOC people, it's a way to actually apply the practice in your everyday life. That's really the best way to put it. And I know that through my own challenges, just navigating life, society, work, career, and all the things that come with it as a Black woman, there was a time where I was meditating in a way that was I think from what I thought meditation was supposed to look like, to your point, from the stereotypes like closing my eyes and sort of zenning out and trying to almost go somewhere
Keep right.
else. And why I'm so passionate about this practice is it's about actually coming into your body. It's about coming into the present moment and being more awake. And then it's also about taking the practice with you after you are done meditating. That's a huge part, right? It's called post-meditation practice. And so when I'm navigating difficult conversations or just out in the world navigating challenges, I am able to see how I can be more responsive and less reactive because I'm practicing noticing my thoughts while I'm sitting. And so it's a very transient practice. It's a very applicable practice to real life challenges and hardships.
Yeah, I mean, I really loved your term zenning out, or it may not be your term, but the idea of zenning out where you're trying to be on some kind of nirvana pedestal, outer space. Why is zenning out not the goal for you, Jasmine?
Because it's temporary, right? It's like a temporary high. As someone who is a very ambitious person, creative person, one of the other reasons I sought this practice is I struggled with being content in the day-to-day, always sort of looking for the next high, the next project, the next thing to go after. And so mindfulness really helps us sit with our discomfort, sit with the things that sort of make us squirm when we're just supposed to be riding the waves of life, right? We're not supposed to be chasing after the next thing. And so that piece I think is really important. And when we're zenning out, we're just seeking that temporary feeling, which isn't what life is like. That's not our daily experience.
What does it feel like, Jasmine, when you lead a meditation? What does it feel like for you, and what do you want for other people, knowing that you can't force other people or make other people feel any sort of way?
I feel a lot of connection, I guess, specifically when I teach others. I feel a connection, oftentimes when I lead a group meditation, a lot of times the response is how different the practice felt doing with the group than it did the person doing it on their own, right? There's really a collective power in group meditation, and I think particularly where I am as a teacher and as a practitioner, that's what I want to see more of for Black people. I think more and more as individuals, we're finding these practices, and so how can we then start to create more spaces where we're collectively tuning in and into that level of awareness, I think could be really powerful and really healing.
Coming up next, more from founder of What We Share, Jasmine Lamb, and singer, songwriter, and producer, Geminelle. Then more from Geminelle on her creative process.
When I was writing mantra loops, I wanted to kind of open up the project with something like a message to myself. And I Invite Ease and Joy was the message that came. And when I hear it, I think about all the things I'm inviting ease and joy into.
You're listening to Our Body Politic.
Speed limit exceeded.
In addition to bringing you News 88.7, Houston Public Media also broadcasts PBS to all of Greater Houston. Want to watch shows like All Creatures Great and Small, Grantchester, or Masterpiece? What about Broadway performances or Austin City Limits? Get exclusive streaming access to over 4,000 PBS shows and films with Houston PBS Passport. For as little as $5 a month, you can stream all these and more.
Take the right turn ahead.
Go to houstonpublicmedia.org/passport.
I'm Sean
Turn right.
Thomasford.
And I'm Noel King.
We are the hosts of Today Explained from Fox.
Every day you hear a lot of news stories, but you don't get much context, and that's where we come in.
Each weekday we take on one essential news story that defines our moment, and we bring listeners the context they need to understand.
Join us weeknights at 7:30 on News 88.7.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for being here today. And most importantly, thank yourself for being here today. My name is Jasmine. I am a mindfulness meditation teacher, and this is Mindfulness in Challenging Times, Part 3. My creativity has no bounds.
Welcome back to Our Body Politic. I'm Farai Judea. If you're just joining us, we're discussing mindfulness and meditation with founder of What We Share, Jasmine Lamb, and Jeminelle, a singer, songwriter, producer, and healer. I want us to listen to one more
Use the
excerpt
left
from the album.
lane,
This is from
then
the track
turn
called
left.
My Creativity Has No Bounds.
But what if you started believing you were deserving of good things?
Turn left.
What if you knew that in the purity and simplicity of this belief, there is power?
So, Jeminelle, as a creator, how does mindfulness work with your creativity?
I think mindfulness works
Continue
with my
straight.
creativity and me not overthinking, like really giving myself an opportunity to be present with the creative energy that's surrounding me and allow like intuition to move through that space and not necessarily try to create a box around it, because the moment I start thinking about like, oh, how are people going to receive this, or does this sound okay, does this feel okay, that's the moment that I lose that creative
Continue
flow.
straight.
So really just being present with the creativity and the creative energy that's around, and allowing myself to be playful and allow myself to make mistakes and just continue to work through those things, I think is really how mindfulness kind of plays a role in my creativity.
And Jasmine, as a creator and entrepreneur, what about
Continue
you?
straight.
Mindfulness for me, when I'm creating, it helps bring me into my body, which I think is often maybe more associated with yoga. But mindfulness for me really brings me into my body, and that helps me express myself and have a lot of clarity and focus, because I think that's also something that's called a focused awareness. So it's like, sort of being aware of what's happening, but also feeling like that sharpness about what's actually in front of me. I think that helps me tap into my creativity, especially on projects.
And as far as your entrepreneurship, you have a company, What We Share. What is it? What do you do, and how does creativity play into that?
So What We Share is a platform I launched in 2017 that's really about advancing the future for multi-hyphenate creators, practitioners. I think that, even more so, we're at a time where the future of work and career is rapidly changing. What We Share is really about
Continue straight.
space, voice, and resources for multidimensional practitioners. Yeah, it's something that I'm extremely passionate about.
And as we wrap up, these have definitely been challenging times. Pandemic, racial reckonings, all sorts of issues with gender, reproductive justice, etc. When you hear about, as inevitably happens, some piece of bad news or challenging news about the world, where does your practice take you? I'll go to you first, Jasmine, and then Jeminelle.
My first thought would be, right where you are. That's the best place. Right in the thick of it, right in the middle, the news hits your timeline and you feel like you can't breathe, you can't catch your breath, right? Take your seat.
Jeminelle?
To my breath, I would say that's usually the first thing. And then, I start to ask myself if there's anything within my control that I can do to support this challenge. And if it's not, then I work on continuing to breathe through to release and letting go, and just acknowledging that the more present I am with my own purpose, is like the more capacity I have to make an impact.
Are you considering doing a collaboration again in the future, the two of you?
I'm sure we'll figure out something that we're going to collaborate on.
Yeah. There's a strong likelihood.
Mm-hmm. Great. Fantastic. Jasmine, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
That was Jasmine Lamb, mindfulness meditation teacher, founder of What We Share. Now I want to wrap up the show with you, Jeminelle. I want to talk more about your musical career. So what were your early musical influences, and how old were you when you started singing?
Oh man, I've been singing since I was a little girl, and I think my brother was a big part of my musical inspiration. He would always leave me burned CDs in the morning just to kind of inspire me to write good music off the top of my head. The ones that resonate the most with me are probably Erykah Badu, Mama's Gun. To this day, still one of my favorite albums. He had given me Guapale's first album, lots of Outkast, obviously Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston in the 90s, and then it was was 13, put a pen and a paper in my hand and say, you should write your own music. And at the time, I was writing short stories and things like that in school, and it was something I really enjoyed, was creative writing. And so when I first realized, oh, like I can write my own music, like I wrote a song that same day.
So when did you start performing with groups?
Around the same time, around 12, 13, I had graduated from, or I had my promotion from the 6th grade, and I sang the national anthem. There was a music manager who was there, who was inspired by my voice, and I ended up singing with 3 other young women in a group called Miss, MISS, and it was a little short-lived, but it was definitely a great experience. Got a chance to understand the music industry a little more through management, through artists and repertoire, what that process looked like, and get to be in front of major labels and kind of learn about what their process is and receiving artists. And I think I was with them for about 9 months to a year.
And you've gotten a chance over the years to perform on, events like the Grammys and also just with a lot of different people. What stands out to you about the moments that have filled your soul from doing your music?
I think whenever I hit any stage, it doesn't matter if it's a small local stage or, the Grammys at Madison Square Gardens. There's always a bit of nervousness. And I think what stands out most to me is once you actually hit that stage, the feeling of belonging is something that I've always felt. Especially in my experience at the Grammys, that was one that I was I don't know, how did I end up here? But my first walk onto the Madison Square Garden stage, looking out and seeing some of my favorite artists in the very front row, and actually performing with some artists who I admire and look up to, and realizing oh, I do belong here. I think that was a really cool feeling for me.
So let's turn to your work on mantra loops. When did you first learn what mantras were, and how did it inspire you?
Yeah, around the time that I was writing mantra loops, I was kind of just searching for something to help me redirect the way that I think. I realized I had a lot of negative self-speak, just from my own experiences, my own environment, from listening to other people and the way that they talk to themselves, the way they talk to me. And I realized that it wasn't healthy for me, especially because my career was advancing. At the time, I was reading a book called Abundance Now by Lisa Nichols, and Lisa Nichols talked a lot about affirmations and mantras. The mantra
Take
that
the right
stood out
turn
to
ahead.
me was, I joyfully submit to the will of my calling. And I remember at the time that was a really hard thing for me to repeat
Turn
to
right.
myself. But over time, as I practiced it, I realized that there was something about being able to submit to the present moment, being able to submit to the opportunities that were coming my way, and to be joyful about them in the same breath. It started to kind of actually happen for me. And so I started kind of making up my own mantras of what I felt like I needed. And the main one that I had thought of was, my success is inevitable. That was the first one.
Yeah.
I realized I was always kind of thinking
Use the
about,
left
when I
lane,
make it to this
then
level,
turn
or
left.
when I get here, that's when I'll be successful, and wasn't able to really celebrate the present day success that I was having. I would get into these
Turn left.
spaces with amazing artists that I wanted to collaborate with, and I was just thinking well, I'm not really where I want to be yet to be in this room, not realizing I was in the room, And so I started saying before, when I would get nervous in these spaces, my success is inevitable. And it would let me relax and kind of just be at ease. And once I was myself, the connections were genuine and the relationships grew. And that mantra really worked for me to be able to just realize my power in a space and just let myself be present.
What is success to you? You are successful by so many different measures, but sometimes people who are successful don't feel successful. What is success to you, Geminel?
That's a beautiful question. I think it took me a long time to really figure out that I was already successful. I measured success by a number of metrics and trying to think about numbers and notoriety and what does it look like to have all of these different things. But I feel successful because I'm able to do what I love. I'm able to work with people that I enjoy and appreciate and admire. I'm able to balance family and work life. And I think the biggest thing that makes me successful is that every morning I wake up and I have this genuine peace of mind. That's something that I couldn't say before. And so I know that I'm successful because of that.
This album, Mantra Loops Volume 1, came out in 2019, 7 tracks. Let's listen to a little bit more of it. The opening track of the album, I Invite Ease and Joy. I love all the songs on this album, but that's one that definitely really hits home for me because I need to invite ease and joy. I'm like a type A workaholic. What does that song mean to you?
Yeah, I feel you and I resonate. I'm definitely a workaholic in many ways. But, you know, for the project and for my life, I just realized that, like, I was making things harder on myself because I wasn't really open to receiving ease and joy. I wasn't open to receiving help or support. I wasn't really like ever satisfied with where things were in life. When I was writing Mantra Loops, I wanted to kind of open up the project with something like a message to myself. And I Invite Ease and Joy was the message that came. And when I hear it, I think about all the things I'm inviting ease and joy into. I'm inviting ease and joy into my health, into my finances, into my relationships. Even when I perform it sometimes, like I'll stop in the middle of the performance and I'll just have people shout out what they want to invite ease and joy into. You hear, like sometimes I don't even think about it, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I invite ease and joy into my nutrition. Or they say they invite ease and joy into their kids, you know? Like into parenting. And so it's really cool to kind of unpack with people what they're hoping to invite ease and joy into. And I think it's such a powerful statement. I'm wearing it now, you know, and it's a reminder to me just to like every day just invite ease and joy into every single moment.
And speaking of kids, you mentioned that you're expecting one yourself. Tell us a
Continue
little bit about
straight.
your background, you know, your family's heritage, how you pull that up into your work, and what you hope to pass on to your child.
Ooh, that's a great question. I could start with growing up multi-ethnic. My mother is Native Hawaiian. My father is African American. I feel like I have the privilege of experiencing both sides of these cultures. Like we spent time in Hawaii a lot growing up, so I got to learn the indigenous practices of Hawaiians, you know, the entire language, the experiences, how we speak to our ancestors, and that's something
Use the left lane, then turn left.
to me because I very much believe in indigenous practices as the true practices of our people. My dad grew up in New York, and kind of learning about the Black American experience out there, it's been really cool to kind of have these two very opposing cultures and relationships, but also feel very connected to both of them. I had the opportunity to go to Africa for the first time this past year.
Oh, wow.
I was in Rwanda, Kigali, Rwanda. Just connecting with African people for the first time made me realize how African we are, and even how much of Hawaiian culture comes from African culture. And so seeing how it's all connected just really made me feel very whole, and realizing all of the overlap that's kind of in that space. And I think having a child, conceiving a child in Africa was like such an amazing experience to be able to bring that cultural energy back with us, but also just having the understanding that I want to share with my child that we are all African, like we come from Africa first, you know. I think that's something that's really important to me, and, you know, and I'm sure that my child will have some of those ancestral experiences with them from just being there and being conceived there.
It's funny, I was conceived in Zambia. I was born in the U.S. but conceived in Zambia, so hopefully your little one will have lots of stories to tell about that trip to Rwanda. Tell us a little bit about the other things that you do. You know, what is your life like these days?
My life is very nuanced. It's been pretty busy, but it's very rewarding. I think everything that I'm doing, it really does replenish and refuel me. I work for a company called Passion Planner. I do a lot of their community relations work. I love providing workshops and opportunities for people to grow and expand, especially in their purposes and their passions. I also run a wellness company with my husband, Arise Wellness. And Arise Wellness really focuses on self-awareness as the greatest form of self-care. So you can, you know, put on face masks and take baths all day, but like at the end of the day, the deeper you know yourself, the better you can predict your patterns and even disrupt those patterns. And so we really focus on helping people get to know themselves at the core.
Take the
of who
left
they are,
turn
their
ahead.
authentic self. On top of that, recording new music for Mantra Roots Volume 2. Definitely want to release this project before I release this baby. But it's been a really beautiful year in terms of just like balancing all of these different projects.
Well, let's listen to a little bit of the song I Am Proud, which is part of the forthcoming release Mantra Roots Volume 2. So you have your next album coming out, Mantra Loops Volume 2, Embodied. What does it mean to you to be embodied?
I think particularly around this project, it was really important to me that the mantras were something that could live in your body. And so this project is very dance-centric. It's unlike anything I've ever put out before. So it's lots of piano, Afrobeat, house music, just big vibes. Yeah, like lots of movement. And these aren't even messages that I've currently embodied myself. Some of them are. Some of them I definitely feel
Take the
deeply
right turn
resonant
ahead.
with. But others I'm like, this is the work that I'm doing. The work to know in every moment that I am more than enough when I show up. To feel like I am luminous even in the dark times. The energy that I feel in this project is something that I definitely feel is a representation of who I authentically am in this season of life. I wanted the music to feel like that. The freedom is the fun. It's liberation at its finest. And I cannot wait to share it with the people.
Well, that's exciting. Geminelle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Use the left lane, then continue straight.
That was singer, songwriter, and producer.
Continue straight.
You can find out more about her work at mantraloops.com. Her new album, Mantra Loops Volume 2 Embodied, will be out later this summer. Thanks for listening to Our Body Politic. We are on the air each week and everywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at Our Body Politic. Our Body Politic is produced by Diaspora Farms and Rococo Punch. I'm host and executive producer Farai Chidea. Nina Spensley and Shanta Covington are also executive producers. Emily J. Daly is our senior producer. Bridget McAllister is our booking producer. Monica Morales Garcia is our producer and fact checker. Not Tina Bean and Emily Ho are our associate producers. This episode was produced by Emily Ho. It was engineered by Mike Garth and Archie Moore. This program is produced with support from the Luce Foundation, Open Society Foundation, Ford Foundation, Craig Newmark Philanthropies, the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Philanthropies, Democracy Fund, the Harnish Foundation, Compton Foundation, the Heising Simons Foundation, the Be Me Community, Katie McGrath and J.J. Abrams Family Foundation, the Pop Culture Collaborative, and from generous contributions from listeners like you.
I'm Cesar Troll, native Houstonian and proud Houston local media partner. I'm not developing digital solutions for my clients. I am advocating for local civic organizations and stressing the importance of trusted media sources. Houston Public Media shares my values, and that's why I am a supporter. I've achieved success in business because of a strong educational foundation. Join me in supporting Houston Public Media. Let's make sure this essential public education resource is available for the next generation of Houstonians.
Skyline Sessions is recorded in the George B. Geary Performance Studio at Houston Public Media. Find every episode online at houstonpublicmedia.org.
Houston Public Media mourns the loss of our friend, visionary supporter, Dan Harder.
This is your NPR station, KUHO Houston, News 88.7, the service of the University of Houston.
Maria, as you can see, the columns which are supposed to tell us whether a case was investigated That column is left blank.
An investigation into how women are sexually abused in ICE detention when they're at their most vulnerable in a medical setting, and how ICE has done very little to stop it.
This often happened, in particular in places where people were organizing, where they were challenging their detention, and so an easy way for ICE to punish the person and retaliate against them is to move them.
All this coming up on Latino USA.
Use the right lane, then turn right.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. NATO will convene a special meeting of its new Ukraine Council this week to discuss security in the Black Sea amid Russian threats. Terry Schultz reports the meeting was called at the request of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Ukrainian President Zelensky says NATO can help solve what he calls the security crisis in the Black Sea by protecting a corridor for grain shipments. In a telephone call with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, Zelensky asked for a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council set up earlier this month at NATO's Vilnius summit. Ambassadors of all 31 member countries are expected to meet with Ukrainian officials on Wednesday at NATO headquarters. Russia withdrew from the deal that allowed Ukrainian grain to be exported through the Black Sea and is now threatening to attack any ships traveling to Ukrainian ports. NATO spokesperson Oana Lingescu calls these actions attempts to weaponize food affecting millions of vulnerable people around the world. For NPR News, I'm Tina Fields in Brussels.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is recovering from an emergency heart procedure. It's the latest twist as Israel's domestic crisis surges with protests against a contentious law that is set to pass on Monday. NPR's Daniel Estrin has more from Tel Aviv.
Netanyahu's office says the 73-year-old prime minister is recuperating from an emergency heart pacemaker implantation and is expected to be released from the hospital Monday to attend the vote on a judicial overhaul that legal experts say would give the government some unchecked powers because it would block Israel's judiciary from being able to overturn government appointments and decisions. Many former security leaders and Mossad spy chiefs say the legislation poses a security threat, with thousands of military reservists threatening not to serve in protest. There have been rallies for and against the legislation, and Israel's President Isaac Herzog met Netanyahu at the hospital to try to broker an agreement with the opposition. The president said this is a time of emergency. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Investors will be keeping a close eye on the Federal Reserve this coming week. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Fed is expected to raise interest rates by another 4 percentage points as part of its ongoing effort to bring down inflation.
Inflation has already fallen by 2/3 in the last year, but at 3% in June, it's still above the Federal Reserve's target. So the central bank is expected to tap the brakes with another quarter-point rate hike this coming week. Some forecasters think that could be the last rate hike of this cycle, a prospect that's helped to spark a rally on Wall Street. On Thursday, the Commerce Department will offer its initial assessment of how fast the economy grew during the last 3 months. Growth in the first 3 months of the year turned out to be faster than initially reported, thanks in part to stronger consumer spending. A report on consumer spending for the month of June will be out on Friday, along with the Commerce Department's latest scorecard on inflation.
NPR's Scott Horsley reporting. This is NPR. The 57-member Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Sweden's special envoy over Quran burnings that sparked mass protests in a number of Muslim countries. The Islamic holy book was burned or defaced during recent public demonstrations in the Swedish capital. And an Iraqi man of Christian origin says he plans to burn the Quran in front of the Iraqi embassy in Stockholm this week. Twitter's new CEO is at it again, bringing about big changes to the social media platform. Elon Musk says the Bluebird logo is on its way out. NPR's Amy Held has more.
X marks the spot where the instantly recognizable Bluebird logo once was. Elon Musk tweeted early Sunday Eastern he's killing off the bird and replacing it with an X. The Bluebird has symbolized Twitter since its launch in 2006. Musk says it should have been changed long ago. Why X? Musk says simply he likes that letter. It's also what he calls one of his children and inspired the name of his newly launched artificial intelligence company. Twitter's planned logo change is just the latest controversial move Musk has made since taking